Nigel has gone from saying this on GB News a few months ago.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it.
To this new position today.
It is our intention, ultimately, that if you've come illegally, you should not be able to stay. You should not be able to make a spurious claim that somehow your right to a family life means you should stay here. We will, in 3 to 4 weeks' time, announce more detailed policy on how we will actually carry out those deportations.
So the poll just out from Find Out Now shows Reform UK charging to an 8-point lead over both Labour and the Conservatives just 1 week out from these critical local elections. And Nigel Farage is vowing online that he'll be eating the Tories for breakfast. So what on earth is behind the party's mega U-turn today on mass deportations? Now, you'll know, much to the chagrin of many in the party, including its former Tory chairman, Zia Youssef, I have been tracking, honestly, this lurch to the left because I'm an independent journalist and I'm not a propagandist for any political party. And you'll remember a lot of this started with this interview on GB News. It was a few months ago between Stephen Edgington and an increasingly tetchy Farage.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. Yeah, I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, people are always going to come and go, and we are a country that's engaged in international trade, and we have relationships around the world through the Commonwealth, etc. But yeah, we have to aim at a balanced migration policy.
But net zero still means hundreds of thousands of people coming into Britain, immigrants coming into Britain. Isn't that too many?
It may well be, but we have to start somewhere.
Trump says in America that he wants mass deportations. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are in Britain at the moment. Some estimates say the number could even be in, 1 million plus. So do you support deporting all of those people?
It's impossible to do. Literally impossible to do.
In terms of the atmosphere in Britain, are you concerned that there is a rising level of anti-white hatred?
I'm just concerned about a deeply divided society.
But today, with the party increasingly in revolt since Rupert Lowe was reported to the police, putting Youssef's position under the microscope, Farage toughened up.
This Labour government claim they've increased deportations, but all they've done is to send away visa overstayers and those who are happy to voluntarily return, often with £3,000 in their pocket. We will demand, this government does the same, that there is a minister for deportations. It will be part of the Home Office, but it'll be a separate department within it. We will need to recruit new people, as much of the evidence is that those that currently work in the Home Office would willfully obstruct policy if we won the next general election. But somebody somewhere in government needs to be held accountable.
And without explicitly saying mass deportations, he suggested a tough new policy would be coming within a month of Election Day.
It is our intention, ultimately, that if you've come illegally, you should not be able to stay. You should not be able to make a spurious claim that somehow your right to a family life means you should stay here. We will, in 3 to 4 weeks' time, announce more detailed policy on how we will actually carry out those deportations. We'll do that after the election, but I make the intention very, very clear here today. We will bring a total end to all asylum claims from people who've come here on travel visas or who are overseas students. We will demand the deportation of all foreign criminals. And for those who come to Britain and who are granted citizenship, that will be regarded as a legally binding contract, just as it is in Australia and elsewhere. We welcome you in if you make those pledges to us, but you actually have to obey the law.
Okay, so he didn't use the term mass deportation, but you will see that is a significant change of rhetoric at least. But can we trust him? Given this was the guy who pledged a rape gang inquiry very recently only to U-turn and leave it to Rupert Lowe to crowdfund for. Well, his arch-rival says no way, as you may not be surprised, posting on X, this is Rupert Lowe, just say in plain English, you'll deport every illegal migrant in the UK. You can't because you won't. We don't need clever wordplay. We need deportations. And you'll only tell us your super secret policy plan after the election. Of course, we won't get fooled again. Edgington, however, is more open to the possibility of genuine change. His reaction on X was this. My question to Nigel Farage last year that started this whole debate was simple. Should every illegal immigrant in the UK be deported? It appears Reform have partly U-turned, coming closer to saying yes than before. The only alternative to mass deportations is mass amnesty. So as you can imagine, I asked a Reform insider today what was going on. And they said, to be blunt, HQ is shitting themselves. It's a direct response to what Rupert Lowe is doing. And I'm going to be honest with you, because I have to be. And remember, I am someone who said I'd still be voting for Reform UK next week in the local elections. At the moment, they remain the best choice. But there are worrying signs about this new leftward shift within the party. So look at this from the Daily Mail today. Reform UK council candidate helps Nigerian get UK study visas, while Nigel Farage demands crackdown and blasts UK universities for being drunk on foreign money. So the newspaper reported that this guy called Christopher Adigoki, who is standing as Reform's candidate for the Hucknall West ward on Nottinghamshire County Council, is a director at the Nigerian-based firm KO2 Educational Services, a placement agent for international students. Now, again, he's working within the law, that's fine, but you can understand that this is a very odd position, given that the party is getting rid of anyone who has even posted once on X saying Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. So I wouldn't be able to be a candidate for Reform UK. As you know, I would never want to be a candidate for any political party. I'm a journalist through and through, but you understand my point. And Nigel Farage did admit today, during that immigration press conference, that the so-called professionalisation of the party has resulted in serious fault lines, especially given good people are being thrust out for simply having posted the C or F word online. Watch.
How would you answer those members who fear that that process has actually taken the party away from its heart and soul?
Well, look, I mean, hundreds of people who applied to be candidates for the county council elections were rejected. Often because of repeated use of words beginning with F and C on social media. And, you know, that might be the way you talk to your mates in the pub, but frankly, you're chucking it out on Facebook or X. It really is something that's going to come back and bite you. Others because they just said things that were just ridiculous, outrageous, embarrassing. So professionalising the party had to be putting in, you know, a vetting system that was as good, if not better, than the other parties. And yes, that has upset some people.
It has. I mean, it has. Do you remember my reporting from a few weeks ago that a brilliant female businesswoman had been rejected from standing for Reform UK because she had a shoplifting conviction from when she was 16 years old? And so it does feel like there is a purge in the party of a lot of true believers, a lot of people who will be watching this show. And in an eviscerating column for the Daily Express today, ex-Reform parliamentary candidate Richard Thompson claims that Nigel has betrayed everything the party stood for. Now, I want to take you through some of his article, and this is really for the people who say, well, isn't reform just the best, worst option? We've just got to go with reform for that reason. Now, that might be true at the local elections, but remember, we've got 4 years before a general election. I think it's important that you understand his disenchantment and why. So this is what Richard Thompson wrote in part for The Express. He said, there was a time when Reform UK gave real hope to the British people, a time when it looked like someone finally had the backbone to stand up to the Westminster cartel and put the hard-working people of Great Britain first. That movement ignited because it championed truth, integrity, and the will of the people, not tired party politics. But let's be clear, Nigel Farage has betrayed everything it stood for. When Nigel swooped in at the 11th hour to, quote, save reform, many were optimistic. But that hope quickly curdled into disillusionment. Under Farage's leadership, reform has drifted into the swamp of establishment politics. All slick spin, no substance, and zero courage. The shameful treatment of Rupert Lowe is the clearest example yet. Journalist Dan Wootton has claimed that Nigel Farage knew that claims Rupert was suffering from dementia alleged to have been leaked by the party were untrue. Whatever the truth of this, Farage stood by while Reform UK under the thumb of Zia Yusuf smeared him in the most disgraceful manner. This was political assassination designed as due process. There's no integrity in that. It's everything the public despises about the political class. The fallout from that episode has sent shockwaves through the grassroots. Long-standing members, activists, and officers have been left reeling, not just at the smear campaign itself, but at the party's total failure to stand by one of its own. Morale has collapsed. There is a widespread sense of betrayal, and it's no surprise. So you can understand, in that context, why Nigel Farage has made the decision just 1 week before the local elections to U-turn on his insistence that mass deportations were impossible. However, at the same press conference, he did insist that reform will not move in the direction of Germany's AfD or the National Rally in France. Watch.
For those that want to drag me into a political direction that perhaps some of the political parties in Europe are at or are headed to, then you know what? I'm not for budging. I'm not for shifting. I've always said this will be a non-sectarian, non-racist political party. That's how it was founded. That's what it'll be. I don't get budged on that, not even by very, very rich men who own motor car companies. Thank you very much.
Okay, to respond now, let me bring in today's superstar panel. And I'm delighted to have one of our favourites returning to Outspoken, the Conservative commentator, former deputy leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. And, as I said, joining us for the first time, host of The Real Beef with Don Keith. It is Don Keith, of course, a contributor to Urban Scoop. So, Rebecca Jane, do you trust Farage on this mass deportation U-turn today?
Do I heck? Why on earth would I trust him? He's doing what all politicians do, isn't he? He's doing that thing where we're coming up to elections, so he's going to feed everybody what they want to hear, and he'll navigate away from all his beliefs and all of his principles just to obtain votes. Unfortunately, that is what Nigel is doing because that's what he does best.
Don Keith, what do you think? But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And for good reason, given the ongoing debates over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other anti-establishment politicians are portrayed. But I have the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It's been a game changer for a news junkie like me. See for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. But I want to show you what is an incredible website and app in action. So let's look at that recent Supreme Court decision in the UK that ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. Now, you can see clearly in one place that over 350 sources around the world are covering this story. Ground News instantly shows how it's being covered by the media, broken down by whether they lean to the left or the right. This is called the bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story, along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. We can see for ourselves quite clearly, for example, that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists, and the Canary, this was my favourite for all the wrong reasons, ran with this clearly ludicrous headline, "Victory for the far right as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. Far right? Try calling J.K. Rowling that to her face." My favourite feature, though, of Ground News is the blind spot feed, which surfaces upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. Go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code on screen to subscribe today, and you'll get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access. That's ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think Nigel Farage has become quite the political chameleon. You know, he kind of goes where the winds go. And I really think that until he saw the way the election in America and other directions that politics are going in other parts of the West, he was very content to stay on the left side of the fence, whereas now I think he's reading the teen leaves, and he sees that things are going to the right and going more conservative again. You know, he started out, I liked his I wouldn't say I like it, but I agree with what he said about it's not politically possible to mass deport folks, but it's only politically impossible now because of the current government that's in control with the Labour government. However, there are plenty of mechanisms within UK law that would allow for the mass deportation of especially illegal immigrants and even some of those who have been naturalized and who may be deemed as a security threat. You have the Immigration Act of 1971, the Counterterrorism and Border Security Act of 2019, and the Nationality and Borders Act of 2022. All of these acts combined provide a mechanism, if you give them, that allows really your Home Secretary to deport all of these folks without any due process. So it may be politically impossible right now with the Labour government, but it's not technically and legally impossible with the right people in power. That's why elections are so important.
Rebecca Jane, what do you think about the fact that it now seems to be acceptable within Reform UK to be a candidate that believes in reparations for slavery, that wants to work with Nigerian immigrants? But if you have said, for example, I think Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner, or use the F word and the C word, you're thrust out. That's, I think, what fascinatingly the journalist from Reuters seemed to be getting at, not usually the type of person who you'd think would be on the side of Reform UK, when she suggested earlier today that the heart and soul was being ripped out of the party, and that's where the unhappiness comes from.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's call it as we see it. Nigel left UKIP because he didn't like the structure of UKIP. He didn't like the board. He didn't like having to answer to people. So he cleared off. He made his own party. He sat in the shadows of Reform whilst Richard Tice well, almost sent it under, actually, because he obviously wasn't very popular. And then obviously when Nigel came out, that's when they've now had this massive rise. So Nigel did all of that because he didn't want to answer to people. He wanted to do what Nigel wanted to do. And what is currently happening with the reform situation and the chopping and the changing and them deciding on, you know, what they stand for this week and what they're going to stand for next week, is all born out of that behaviour from Nigel. It's his party. That's it. And this is what obviously what Ben Habib sort of went into and everything else that unfolded with that situation. This is Nigel's party. Whatever he decides tomorrow could be a complete opposite change to what they're doing today. That will be what they do. And that's what's going to keep on happening. And that's what Ben's spoken out about. And Ben is not wrong. That what needs to happen with reform is they need to be more democratic, because they're not. The one man's party and what he wants and what he believes. And that is what is going to stay as long as they stay in this format. So yes, of course, this week he doesn't like Rupert Lowe and he doesn't like a whole number of other people and certain things that certain people say. The man does not stand on his principles. Sorry. Not sorry, actually.
Sorry, not sorry. I mean, Don Keith, this must be an interesting one for you because, of course, your big connection to the UK is through Tommy Robinson, and Nigel has been pretty negative about him. I mean, he sort of vaguely said while he was in the US for CPAC that actually it wasn't the right thing that he was in solitary confinement, but that's been it. And there seems to be this real line that Farage has in his own head, at least, that he always has to keep a very, very distinct boundary between whatever party he's in, be it UKIP, be it the Brexit Party, now Reform UK, and Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, you know, that was Urban Scoop's own Vicky Richter that got that soundbite.
Yes, I remember.
So shout out to her for getting that from him. But, you know, and I said yesterday or the day before with Matt Goodwin when I was speaking with him, I completely understand his strategy and his frame of mind, even though I don't agree with it, of distancing himself from Tommy Robinson. I think even Tommy understands that. And Tommy has by no means ever even asked to be accepted by reform. What Tommy wants is reform to recognize the working class, the problems that the working class people have in Great Britain. And if Nigel and Reform could pay a little bit more attention to them and speak out about issues that affect them, Tommy's happy to stay in the background and not have, you know, Tommy on many occasions has extended an olive branch to Reform, only to have it batted down by Nigel Farage on various occasions. But, you know, there's a difference between distancing yourself from someone and not endorsing them and telling blatant lies about them. You know, Nigel brought up said that accused Tommy of assaulting a woman, just a blatant lie brought up out of nowhere. And anytime the media asked Nigel about Tommy, rather than just saying, you know, no comment, I don't want to talk about Tommy, he continues to use these opportunities to throw him under the bus. What he needs to realize is that Tommy has a massive following in the working class. Until he recognizes, I don't think he's going to do as well as he thinks he's going to do, as long as he continues to bash Tommy Robinson.
Well, of course, there was Tommy famous comment, wasn't there? That lot. That was how Richard Tice described Tommy Robinson's supporters. Right. And Rebecca Jane, I mean, look, you had to try and deal with this issue while you were the deputy leader of UKIP too, because every right-wing party in the United Kingdom seems to be torn to pieces on the whole concept of should we welcome Tommy Robinson in. But I would argue that the Overton window has just really moved on this subject since his imprisonment, which is clearly just so wrong on so many levels, morally wrong, politically wrong, ethically wrong. And once you have Elon Musk, the world's richest man, currently a senior member of the Trump administration, weighing in, it's a bit like you can no longer suggest that he's some type of fringe figure, Tommy Robinson.
No. He's not a fringe figure by anybody's stretch of the imagination. He's not. And yeah, it was, you know, that, oh gosh, the Tommy Robinson conversation the Tommy Robinson problem for me at UKIP was very much prominent from the get-go. And it was something that I grappled with, actually, because ultimately there's a lot of things that Tommy says and does that I don't like and I don't agree with, and I don't want to be associated to it. And so obviously, you know, that stance of, there's one thing of saying that I don't want to associate with this and I don't want to be part of it, but there's another thing where you want to just bash somebody for the attention, and that is what Nigel is doing with it, isn't it? You know, he could just let it go. He could be quite favourable to Tommy, but he's not, because it gets more attention, whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's like a bad toddler, isn't it? If you give him bad attention, it's still attention. So that's part of the problem for me. But Tommy, my issue with it was, I don't like a lot of what he stands for, but equally, who the heck are we to judge anybody for whatever they believe and whatever they think? Because Tommy is really prominent now, you know, and he has been for quite some time. There's a lot of people who agree with him. So if we want to stand out there and we want to say, we don't like this, we don't agree, and I won't support it, you're all, oh goodness gracious, are we actually showing that again? But you are actually, you know, you're for goodness sakes, Dan, you're separating yourself from the people that are voting for you. That's better. You're casting judgment on people for their opinions and for who they want to support. And we shouldn't cast judgment and opinions on anybody. Are you done with the pictures now?
Yeah, I'm done with them.
Thanks.
Don't worry.
I look significantly better than I do right now.
You look absolutely stunning. Always, Rebecca Jane. Always. And it's so lovely to have you
Can I ask
back,
Rebecca a question?
Please, come and Don.
What is something Tommy said that you don't agree with? You said you don't agree with everything he's said. What are some examples of that?
Yeah, I know. And it's a really fair question. And this is why I don't like delving into this, because I can't specifically give you actual things that he said. It's more about
See, that's the case always.
It is always going to be the case. And it is, you know, and one of my issues with when obviously I was deputy leader of UKIP was I got tarnished with that brush all the time. Anytime anybody asked me what I did, I told them what I did, they were like, oh yeah, that Tommy Robinson racist party. I'm like, no, that's not even a thing. That was never a thing. And I had it all the time. And there's some interviews that he's done, and as the context of a whole, and the things that he's spoken about Muslims, and I understand where Tommy's coming from. I really do. But as a whole of the things that I've watched, I'm like, I can't quite get on board with that. But if you'd asked me to give you some examples before we went on air, I've done my research and I got it for you. But as a whole, it's just, there's a lot of things that I'm just not on board with. But I can't give you specifics today.
Yeah, but that's kind of par for the course with anybody. If you ask them what's Tommy said, when they go on, they say, I don't agree with everything Tommy said. Okay, well, give me one example. Nobody can ever give you an example. Well, Tommy's a racist. Give me one example of something racist Tommy said.
Yeah, no, I don't think that.
No one can ever do that. Well, give me something he said about Islam or Muslims that might be determined racist, something that you don't agree with. You don't agree with them not, you know, the mass rape of the young girls in Britain. You don't agree with the fact that 68% of Muslim women don't work. They have 6 to 8 kids that are supported by the state and have free housing, 3,000 mosques in Great Britain, 130 Sharia courts. I mean, do you agree with all that or not? Because that's the only thing Tommy is saying. So I don't see how anybody cannot agree with what
Indeed, but what so often happens, though, is that these figures are presented as bogeymen, especially in the British media. And the same thing has happened with Katie Hopkins. And something that I have been really big on since I've entered the independent world is to hell with this thing of, oh, I don't agree with everything this person says, but you actually don't even have to put that as a caveat anymore. And certainly, I don't agree with everything that anyone says. That's the whole reason that we have these debates. But I do think the way that Tommy Robinson has been presented in the British media for such a long time is the reason why there is this total fear, and you still see it with Nigel Farage, this total desire to just distance all the time. And actually, at some point, I believe in the independent media explosion, and part of what you're doing, Don, will be a part of this, will change that. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.